Good afternoon. Good afternoon. We'll get going shortly. There's quite a few registered for this afternoon, so we will give people a moment or two to come into today's session. Hope everybody is well. If you can hear me, either give me a thumbs up in the chat or pop something in the Q&A. Sometimes the chat decides not to work, and I'm not sure why. But if it's a Q&A, it's the Q&A. Just let me know you can hear me. That would be fabulous. Hello, hello. We'll get going in just a second. Marvelous. Marvelous, marvelous, marvelous. Yeah, I'm not sure, Michelle, why the chat isn't working. Zoom does, I think somewhere along the line I've clicked a button and I can't work out which button I've clicked, which is never terribly helpful, but that's what I suspect I have done. Okay, everybody, let us get started because there's quite a lot to get through today. We've had quite a bit going on. Okay, so welcome along to today's safeguarding briefing. This is our second or third of 2025. They're about 20 to 25 minutes. The idea is to give you a brief overview of what's going on in the world of safeguarding, what are the sort of reports. They all work in the same way. We will look at generally what's going on. We will look at what is happened in terms of reports, are there any new guidance, and then we'll look at any particular legislation that's floating about. And because we're specialists in supporting safeguarding professionals working with 16 to 24-year-olds, I tend to focus on legislation that's going to affect that age range. That's me. Too many years legal experience, lots of years as an independent safeguarding chair for those within FE and HEIs. And I do lots of other things as well within the sector. So well versed in the challenges, well versed in the difficulties, but also well versed in the joy that working in this particular sector actually brings. If you are in a busy office, you might want to pop some headphones on. If you've got questions and you're here live, then you have the joy of, or not, who knows, of being able to ask me questions as we go through. So please use the Q&A function for that, and I will do my best to answer them either as we go along or at the end of the briefing. So feel free to ask your questions as we go along. So what has been happening in the world of safeguarding over the last few weeks? Because we do these every 6 weeks, otherwise it just gets a little bit unmanageable to try and do these in one go. We've got some new legislation that's finally come in, and I will talk about that later on. Again, we've got some updates to legislation that's currently making its way through Parliament. But I think some of the biggest things that are going on actually don't necessarily directly relate to the world of safeguarding, but nevertheless, we are seeing the impact within the world of safeguarding well-being, mental health. What is happening out in America is causing a lot of stress and a lot of challenge. That there's lots of rhetoric coming out of that country at the moment. There's not just on the big global stage with things that are going on, but lots of rhetoric around who's been encouraged to go and live within that country. The likes of Andrew Tate being welcomed with open arms in that particular arena, although I understand he's gone back to Romania. Other people there with very, very misogynistic, very challenging views are being pretty much allowed to say what they want unfettered. And that has an impact on our young people. It has an impact on our adults who are trying to work out whether this is now okay or it isn't. It isn't. And then how do you navigate all of that? Because so much of the information that our young people consume comes from a device. A lot of it is based within the United States, and the people who own and run those organisations, those big companies, are kind of sitting fairly close to a president who's doing things that are incredibly challenging to the world of democracy right now. So, whichever view you take, whichever position you stand on, it really doesn't matter. I think the bottom line is there's a lot of challenge happening, and trying to help our young people understand and make their own decisions and understand how to access safe information, information that will give them a broader world view, information that will help them form a rounded opinion on what is happening, is really, really crucial right now, because there's a whole pile of things that are going on that are really causing an awful lot of stress and anxiety. And if we're not on it, if we're not kind of trying to help them navigate this, they can turn into really awful welfare and well-being issues. And if you've been around for a while, you'll know that I take a very broad view on what safeguarding is within this particular age range. Because for me, if you take too narrow a view, you will miss those elements that can turn into something else. And if you miss them, then that's when the problems can really begin for the institution. So I'm very much a broad brush approach kind of person when it comes to safeguarding. All right, let's dive into what has been going on in the world of reports. And there are quite a few that have been floating about. So some positive news is that the National Audit Office, when they've looked at the Violence Against Women and Girls strategy and the plans that were made in 2021 and in 2022, respectively, 78% of the commitments have been delivered. However, it does note that violence against women and girls is still a growing issue and a significant issue. There's a University of Central London study that is showing that 1 in 4 children, so those 0 to just before 18, receive children's social care services before they reach the age of 18. It's a fairly high number. The UK Safer Internet Centre have reported that 79% of 18 to 17-year-olds are coming across scams online at least once a month. And whilst we haven't any particularly recent reports, I think those of us who've worked in this sector for a while are well aware of the implications that scams can have, and the challenges that they can reach. We tend to think a lot of them, we do tend to think about scams as affecting those who are more vulnerable but are older. And I think this certainly was a stark but necessary reminder to me, that it really doesn't matter the age of the person. These scams are here. They're getting more and more sophisticated. And for 79% of 8 to 17-year-olds coming across them at least once a month, it's something we really have to be aware of. There should be a space bar there. So Centrepoint's report is that 1 in 62 16 to 24-year-olds have been facing homelessness in the year 2023 to 2024. It's certainly something I've seen an increase in the work I do with the HEIs, and that 16 to 18-year-old age range has been, there's definitely been a rise happening there of young people facing homelessness and sofa surfing, and really, for a whole variety of reasons, finding it a real struggle. Internet Safety, the UK charity, have reported that in their latest survey, fewer young people feel safe online this year than they did last. So it was 81% previously said they felt safe online, and now that's dropped to 77% saying they feel safe online. Not a massive drop, but still I think probably a statistically significant drop that has occurred there. And I thought this was really important certainly for those working within HE and certainly thinking about where things are. We talk a lot about sexual abuse, and there's a really big sexual abuse agenda, prevention agenda within HE at the moment. But the National Policing Vulnerability Knowledge and Practice Programme has produced their latest report. And this is for April 2023 to March 2024. And they've recorded 262 domestic abuse related deaths in that time period. 11 were children under 16. And then in 81% of child deaths from 2020 to 2024, so including those 11, 81% of child deaths, the suspect was the victim's carer. And in 20% of all cases in the same time period, the victim or suspect were known to children's services. Now, we've long known that children and victims of domestic abuse usually were known to the child or the person we know within deaths post breakup, where there is a relationship link. There has been that sort of relationship, and we do include those within the domestic abuse figures. But yeah, 81% of all those child deaths from 2020 to 2024, so a 4-year span, the suspect was the victim's carer. And I think that's a stark reminder that where those who are meant to be safe, those who are meant to be providing care and love and general well-being support and welfare support to our young people can often be the most dangerous to our young people. In terms of guidance, there isn't a huge amount. I'm expecting a whole load more to come out as we move further into the summer, because there's a raft of legislation, and obviously we've got the Keeping Children Safe in Education updates, which are due to come out probably the back end of next month, towards the back end of May, beginning of June time. But for now, we've got 2 changes to the inspection framework document. So there's updates to the Children's Social Care Providers Inspection Framework. And those of you who are caught by the Social Care Common Inspection Framework, or SCIF as it's delightfully known, and there are updates to that too. So well worth having a look, making sure that if you are caught by either of these, you are looking at them. The Social Care Common Inspection Framework, you may get caught by if you are providing accommodation to under 18s. Some of the universities I work with have specific programs that are for under 18s, and they, as part of those programs, they provide accommodation, and then they get caught by the Common Inspection Framework. So well worth checking to make sure you're not caught by that particular framework, and if you are, that you are complying with it. So where are we in terms of legal updates? So I've split this into 2. We've got the upcoming, and I'll talk about some of the new ones as well. So the Children's Wellbeing and Schools Bill is still floating through. There are updates happening as to various things, mostly for schools that are happening at the moment, but it's well worth keeping an eye on that. There's a new bill proposed called the Law of Apologies, and this is aimed at adults who were victims of child sexual abuse when they were children. And then we've got some more updates in terms of the Crime and Policing Bill. Now, you may recall that about a year or so ago, the previous government had a bill going through Parliament that covered things like AI generated content. And when Parliament changed, when the government changed, all that legislation came off the legislation plate at the time. And slowly but surely, it's kind of been making its way back onto that particular itinerary. So we had a number of new offences that were added to the Crime and Policing Bill that I talked about in January. And then we've got some new offences that are being included in the Crime and Policing Bill around AI generated content. So offences around generating AI content using pictures of real people. So the face is a real person, but the body is AI generated. The imagery is AI generated, but it's of a sexual nature. Things around the sorts of apps that you can use and the legislation around that. So things like we see Instagram filters and we see Facebook filters and Snapchat filters and all of that on a slightly darker level. If those platforms are producing apps that allow you to do naked imagery, then they may well be caught by these offences as well. Really welcome. Not entirely sure how it is going to be policed, but it is a really, really welcome addition to this particular bill. The other thing that I think is likely to cause some challenge, because I know this causes challenge for the HEI sector in general anyway. Currently, if you are an adult working in a regulated activity and are under supervision, you don't need an enhanced DBS. You will only get a basic DBS. The change here is the suggestion that if you work in a regulated activity, even under supervision, there should be an enhanced DBS. That, for some, I think will be a really, really welcome addition, depending on the nature of the work that they're doing under that regulated activity. For others, I think it may just be another kind of, oh no, what on earth do we do with this now? And yet again, and I look forward to those conversations as with members of the Leaders Hub and with supervisors about how on earth we deal with this within your particular sector and your particular organisation. I think it's going to be really interesting if this catches out a number of students, and I suspect it possibly will. So enhanced DBS may well be required for trainee teachers, for example, if it isn't already. For those who are working under somebody else's supervision as well, is going to be particularly challenging. So we'll see how that pans out. Like I said, welcome for some, maybe a little oh no for others. And then what have we got that's new? Well, the Online Safety Act, as of the 17th of March 2025, the next set of legal requirements came into force. So platforms must now implement appropriate measures to remove illegal material quickly when they become aware of it, and to reduce the risk of priority criminal content from appearing in the first place. So that's the next big step under the Online Safety Act, and I've certainly seen a number of platforms have updated their terms and conditions in relation to this. And then relatively hot off the press, as of the 3rd of April, Martin's Law received royal assent. So this is the Terrorism Protection of Premises Act 2025. This is the piece of legislation that is here as a result of a campaign following the bombings at Manchester Arena at the Ariana Grande concert. There are a number of criteria, and for lots of institutions, having 200 individuals may just be a step too far, maybe too big. However, if we think about the sorts of events that universities will put on, things like conferences, things like open days, things like residentials, or having inter-school competitions, or all sorts of things, you may well find that you reach 200 individuals fairly swiftly. So I would urge you to start, if you haven't already, to make sure that those who are responsible for organising these things and your governance teams are aware of this legislation, and you work out pretty swiftly whether or not you are caught by it. So have a look, make sure you understand it, make sure you've checked it, because I suspect a number of institutions will be caught. And the 800 or more individuals, if you've got student unions on your premises, as much as I understand they're a separate legal entity in most cases, if they are having gigs, events, things like that, you'll need to, they'll need to be making sure that they comply with this as well. So definitely, it's really, really welcome. But you need to understand it, and you need to make sure that as an organisation, you know what your responsibilities are under this particular piece of legislation, because it isn't just risk assessments. There's more to it that you need to think about as part of this. So please, if you know, most higher education institutions will do something that will attract at least 200 individuals at least once a year. So do make sure that you have checked this through, and if you're not already considering what this means for you as an organisation, you have a look and make sure that you are aware of it. So those are our updates. If you are looking for refresher training, our next session is the 24th of June 2025. If you are looking for supervision, let's have a conversation. If you want more regular support, then join our Safeguarding Leaders Hub. Again, let's have a conversation. And if you want to make sure your safeguarding practices are up to scratch, then let's have a conversation about audits and how I can help you with that. Otherwise, thank you very much. And if you have any questions, please feel free to pop them in the Q&A. Wait while everybody types. If you've got a question, please feel free to pop it in the chat, in the Q&A. And I will try and work out what on earth I've done to the chat function. Oh, bless you, Michelle. Thank you very much. I'm glad you've enjoyed your first time. Yes, come and have a look. It's probably going to undergo a fairly big overhaul in the next few weeks. But if you've got any questions, please, Michelle, feel free to send me an email. Absolutely fine, and we can have a chat. Thank you, Angie. Speak to you soon too. Would work experience supervision now need an enhanced DBS? Oh, that's a really, really good question. I won't know until we've got this particular piece of legislation through. So we'll just have to wait and see what that looks like. But I would suggest that if you are already doing a standard DBS for work experience and they're doing a regulated activity, I don't know whether it's going to be a choice situation under the Act. So just keep it kind of half in mind at the moment, and then wait and see what the Act actually says. I know that's not it's a very lawyer-like answer. Oh yeah, I'm very sorry about that. But I think it's definitely one to watch this space on, and will depend on the age of the young person as well. So yeah, let's just watch this space, but keep half an eye on it to make sure that we are well aware of it. But brilliant question. Oh yeah, thank you very much. If there are no more questions, lovely people, then I will end today's session. Thank you all very much for being here. If you do want to talk to me about anything that we've talked about, or any ways that I might be able to help you, then please feel free to send me an email, and we'll arrange time to have a conversation. Have a wonderful Easter break if you get one. And I will see you in a few weeks, lovely people. Take care. Bye for now.